take a couple deep breaths, you'd be surprised how, how effective deep breathing is. You can do that 2 or 3 times, and it starts to lower your heart rate. It brings oxygen into your body, into your lungs. It brings oxygen into your brain, which allows you to think better.
Transmission received. Authorization granted. Welcome to the video.
What's up, dreamers? And I hope you're having a fantastic day, or had a fantastic day, depending on where you are in the world. And I want to let you know that you are awesome. Welcome to Driving and Vibing. Woo, woo, woo. What's the vibe today? I want to talk about frustration, irritation, getting angry, these kinds of emotions, and then I want to talk about kind of things that can be done, tips to get through these emotions, tips to try to combat these before they happen, possibly, and turning these emotions into motivators. I want to start with a little bit of background, a little bit of story. When I was younger, through my younger years, teenage years, this and that, yada, 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 I had some pretty hefty anger issues, I will say. I got angry at everything, like very angry. I would, in my very early years, I would say up until maybe like 12 or so, I would kind of get angry because I wasn't like too much in the public domain yet, right? So at school I'd kind of contain myself, but at home I know I was getting angry. And then through my teenage years I would really only get angry at home. People never saw this side of me, but it was happening. And I don't think that really helped, was the fact that I was probably holding some anger in, or frustration, or irritation, and letting it build up until I got back home, and then something kind of set me off. And this would fade into gaming, right? My gaming community, my gaming, my competitions when I was competing, and I would get angry at the game. I'd get very mad at the game, and when you get frustrated at something, I think I've talked about this before, but when you get angry or frustrated or irritated, your ability to kind of think straight starts to dwindle down. So during my competing times, as I would get irritated and more frustrated, because I wasn't really dealing with it, I was kind of just getting more and more frustrated. It kept stacking on top of itself. So let's say I kept getting outplayed by somebody, that would start irritating me, and because that I would overthink everything. I'd start playing worse. My executive decision making started maybe taking a downward spiral, and now my shots, I would start missing my shots, and then I would get double frustrated, and it's just like a downward spiral. There are things that can be done to help combat this, right? To help with the situation at hand. So we'll take the gaming as an example. What I could and what I have done is I always go back to mindset, like just how I perceive things, how people perceive things, how people look at things and feel about things. It can always be, you can always think about it. If you think about it in that regard, you can kind of, you can kind of give yourself some leeway and think about it in a different way. So if I was getting angry about somebody outplaying me, and this could turn to motivation, I'll get to that in a minute, but if I was getting angry about somebody or irritated that somebody continuously outplayed me and I was letting that get to me, what I could do, instead of thinking about how irritating it is that they keep outplaying me, I could sit back for a second and just give myself and think about it. Like, breathe. So breathing tactics are one. That's a really good tip right there, is to breathe. So I'd take a couple deep breaths. You'd be surprised how effective deep breathing is. You can do that 2 or 3 times, and it starts to lower your heart rate. It brings oxygen into your body, into your lungs. It brings oxygen into your brain, which allows you to think better. And breathing is a very powerful tool. So what I could have done, or what I started doing after I realized all of this stuff, was I would breathe and then I would think about it. Maybe they aren't outplaying me because they might be, but maybe it's not because they're a better player. Maybe they're playing better right at this game, and that happens. There are some games where I outplay people because I'm having a better game than normal, and there's times where other people outplay me because they're having a better game than normal. That happens. If you think about it, that probably happens a lot. So then you can think about it that way. But then you can also, because now that I started to level out my head here a little bit, think about it in the aspect that, just instead of getting angry, let's turn that into motivation. Let's figure out what they're doing to outplay me. How are they doing that? Let's try to figure that out, and let's try to combat what they're doing, so we can outplay them outplaying us, right? This can happen in everyday life as well. I'm just using gaming as an example, but use that as a motivator. So you could also say the same thing in regard to health and wellness. Let's say you start your wellness journey, and this happened to me. I think I've said this in a video before, but it took me 8 months to start actually showing muscle. When I started going to the gym, I pushed and pushed and pushed, and there are times where I would get irritated, And one of the tactics I used at that, instead of giving up and being like, well, I'm never going to build muscle, and this is all just BS, and this is all what people talk about, is that go to the gym and you'll get quote unquote fit, but after 6 months you're like, what? Well, I started asking questions, started Googling stuff, right? There are different body types. I didn't know this before that. There are different body types. There are body types that the body type that I hold. So there's 3 different body types. Off the top of my head, I forget the name. I don't want to say them wrong because I don't relay this information so often that I don't really know off the top of my head. It's like mesomorph and ectomorph, and then there's another one. And I am the body type that is, like slimmer but harder to build muscle, like harder to gain weight, harder to build muscle with. I didn't know this at first. And then talking to some people, this is actually, this is true. There's other people that I have talked to who are in the same body type, and it took them, the one guy told me it took him a whole year, a year and a half or so to start building muscle. But then once he started building it, the body realized that it needed to build muscle, and then it did. So I used this information, and instead of getting angry or irritated, and instead of letting, that affect my workouts or my journey in general, I thought about it, and I did a little bit of research, but then I thought about it in a different light, right? Instead of just the frustration light. This could happen with nutrition too. If you start eating something and that is quote unquote healthy for you, and this has happened to me, I will say that I eat oatmeal with fruit, and I put very little into it. Oatmeal, fruit, almond milk, and chia seeds and flax seeds, and then some honey. But I added banana on top of the fruit, and I couldn't figure out why. I was feeling so groggy. I would eat my regular bowl without banana, and I'd feel fine. But then I started adding banana, and I could not for the life of me figure out for about 2 weeks why I was feeling so worn out, or so groggy, or so it was impacting me heavily. This banana was because it was too much sugar, too many carbs. Bananas are one of the highest sugar fruits. So there's a little tidbit of information if you know or not. Thanks, son. But I just couldn't figure out exactly what was going on, and then I realized that I had to go back, and instead of getting angry or irritated, I used that to, it was frustrating, of course. This sun's killing me. It was frustrating, of course, to not really understand or know what was happening. But I went through my changes. What did I change recently that could have, negatively impacted my energy levels? And it turns out it was the bananas. I realized I log everything. I go over this in videos, but I log all my meals. I realized that I was adding bananas in, for the health benefits of bananas, but apparently it was just too much in that one specific meal, and it was causing me to be groggy and worn out. So I used that as a motivating factor instead of getting irritated that something is, my health and wellness routine is backfiring on me. I used it and it motivated me to push through and figure out what exactly was happening. So that happens to a lot of people. A lot of people respond differently to foods. So that's another kind of little tidbit of information to keep in mind here. So anyway, if anybody has any tips and trips and ticks and tricks and tips that they use to help with their emotions, to kind of gather them and everything, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear them. I'd love to hear tactics that people use. Maybe I can implement them in my life. And if you like what you hear here, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Greatly helps out the channel. And I hope to see everybody in the next video. Later, dreamers.